The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television. Here is the second loose end. To continue the thread begun by Laura Martinchek and the idea of how you're going to pay for that, and then Stephanie Kelton's answer, we're going to keep going here criticizing the Democratic centrists with this article. Pyrrhic Party, the Democratic Establishment's War on Progressives, written in April of 2018 before the midterm elections. By supporting corporate-friendly candidates and policies, congressional Democratic leaders are moving closer and closer toward open warfare with their party's base. There is a real need to raise money, of course, but that's tempered by what Stephanie Kelton told us a few minutes ago. There is a real need to raise money, of course, but the party's leaders have chosen to raise and spend money in ways that conflict with voters and render it all but ineffective as a force for much-needed change. Under the best-case scenario, the party's establishment is heading toward a Pyrrhic victory, and other grimmer scenarios are possible. A Pyrrhic victory is a victory that inflicts such a devastating toll on the victor that it is tantamount to defeat. Democrat versus Democrat. A majority of Democratic voters, led by Black, brown, and female Democrats, told pollsters in a recent study that they supported movements within the Democratic Party to take it even further to the left and oppose the current Democratic leaders. A new study by Data for Progress shows that the Democratic Party's base has moved left and that voters overall are ready for unabashed progressive politicians. And yet, as if determined to block their own party's progress, House Democratic operatives have been attacking progressive candidates in public and working to undermine them in private. The Fourth Estate has been helping with this, if you haven't noticed. The party's antipathy for progressive candidates and ideas seems to grow more conspicuous with each passing day. The party's penchant for centrist, corporate-friendly candidates has long been the subject of Washington cocktail hour talk, but a series of news reports has placed it squarely in the public eye. First, there was the smear attack against Laura Moser, who is running in a Texas congressional primary. In language worthy of the cheapest Republican hit job, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, DCCC, called Moser a Washington insider and accused her of disliking life in Texas. Moser had expressed antipathy for her hometown, not the state, saying that was a story for another day. A DCCC spokesperson called Moser unqualified and doubled down on the deception with a comment about Laura Moser's outright disgust for life in Texas. Moser responded with an attack on party bosses in smoke-filled rooms who are trying to tell Texas what to do, and was rewarded with a fundraising surge that almost certainly helped her win a spot in her district's upcoming runoff election. Counting Crow. More recently, The Intercept published the contents of a secretly recorded tape in which Steny Hoyer, the second highest-ranking House Democrat, openly acknowledges that the party was intervening in a Colorado primary on behalf of corporate lawyer Jason Crow. In the tape, Hoyer repeatedly asks Crow opponent Levi Tillerman to leave the race. As the Philadelphia Inquirer's Will Bunch points out, the party's infrastructure is working against elements of the very anti-Trump resistance that represents its greatest hope for victory. Nevertheless, Hoyer defends the practice of intervening in local Democratic primaries. Staying out of primaries sounds small d democratic, very intellectual and very interesting, said Hoyer, who claimed the result would be that somebody wins in the primary who can't possibly win in the general. House Majority Leader Nancy Pelosi defended Hoyer after the Tillman tape. Oh, really? That's a surprise. After the tape became public, calling it a conversation about the realities of life. Well, that's your reality, Nancy. What's important in all of this is that 1 in 5 children in America lives in poverty, goes to sleep hungry, said Pelosi. That's what makes this election so urgent for our children. So if the reality is that some candidates can get into the general more than others, then that's a clear eyes conversation. Oh, Nancy, that's a snake eyes thing to say. We have to know the difference between snakes and good faith people, and you are certainly the former, not the latter. Money for nothing. Hoyer's contemptuous dismissal of democratic governance as intellectual and interesting, and Pelosi's defense of his actions obscure a reality of life that is nearly as important as the principle that primary voters should choose their own candidates. The Democratic establishment has been notoriously terrible at picking winners. They're also notoriously rapacious when it comes to taking care of middle income and lower income citizens. A truly clear-eyed assessment of the Democratic Party's recent record would show that, under its current leaders, the party lost both houses of Congress and roughly 1,000 seats in state legislatures during the Obama years. The fact that the electoral tides seem to have shifted this year says little about their leadership. The shift is largely due to the party's base understandable horror at Trump's leadership. In a 2013 PowerPoint slide, the DCCC famously told freshman Democrats in Congress that they should plan on spending 4 hours a day raising money for their re-election campaigns. The party is using its candidates to feed an infrastructure of consultants that reinforce the need to raise copious amounts of cash. In a leaked memorandum of understanding between the DCCC and its candidates, the party organization insists on overseeing budgets and campaign finance plans. The MOU also requires candidates to reserve at least 75% of funds raised for paid communications. This enriches a certain type of Democratic consultant. It also precludes candidates from embracing the ground-based, movement-aligned strategies that could help increase voter turnout and win races previously thought unwinnable. It prevents the development of lower-cost alternatives to the kinds of campaigns that force politicians to spend hours every day raising money. Austerity light. Perhaps not coincidentally, the party's leaders have taken rhetorical postures and adopted policy positions that conflict with voters' more progressive instincts. Hoyer supported the Iraq War and was deeply critical of the Iran nuclear treaty, a major, greatest foreign policy achievement for the Obama administration. The Obama administration. Domestically, he is an austerity advocate who once insisted that benefit cuts to Social Security and Medicare should remain on the table in negotiations with Republicans. Pelosi, while progressive-leaning on many issues, progressive speaking on many issues, has been a strong proponent of pay-as-you-go or pay-go rules that would require Congress to find funds for all new initiatives, either from taxes or cuts to existing programs. While Pelosi describes the idea as common sense, it is an economically unnecessary measure that makes it more difficult to enact progressive programs. Economist Stephanie Kelton has written extensively on the topic. Kelton discussed deficit economics in a recent interview with me, which can be seen here. Pelosi recently eulogized billionaire Peter G. Peterson, a leading voice for austerity economics and Social Security cuts, and for the deficit-fixated policies that have hamstrung progressives for decades. The desire to remember a friend is, of course, understandable, but Pelosi went further, saying of Peterson, "His prophetic voice on the importance of fiscal sustainability brought together generations of policymakers, no matter their political background, to find common ground and effect solutions. His legacy will endure in many ways, but especially for his work at the Peterson Foundation, which will continue to advance America's fiscal and economic challenges now under the leadership of his son, Michael." Words like these send a discouraging message to the progressive voters that comprise the bulk of the Democratic base. They suggest that the Democrats will remain the party of austerity light, favoring budget cuts over bold programs to rebuild the economy along Rooseveltian and Western European lines. Damned if they do. On one level, at least, it's possible to feel some sympathy for their position, except perhaps for the hypocrisy. Democratic leaders feel they need big money to win races, a belief that has been borne out by experience. That belief has been reinforced by studies like this one from the political scientists Thomas Ferguson, Paul Jorgensen, and Ji Chen on the dominant role money plays in electoral outcomes. But the Democrats have a problem the Republicans don't. The pursuit of big money drives establishment Democrats to adopt positions and to nurture a political culture that prevents them from winning their natural constituencies. Republicans can run on a pro-corporate, pro-wealth agenda without much difficulty, But Democrats need to win white, black, brown, and young Americans who are lower income and working class, and must drum up enough enthusiasm to bring them to the polls on a regular basis. That's hard to do with an agenda that is, in effect, a kinder, gentler variation on the Republicans' view of government as a hamstrung and sometimes nefarious external force in American life. It's true that Democrats have a good chance of winning back the House next year, but then what? Are they going to govern as they have governed in the past, by offering only limited possibilities in the present and low expectations for the future? If they do, they will lose again once voter disaffection sets in. Fortunately, there's a way out. As Thomas Ferguson told us in a recent in-depth interview, the Sanders campaign showed Democrats how they can win without big money donors. That campaign became a financial powerhouse by receiving millions of small dollar contributions from a broad base of supporters. It won't be easy. The dynamics of congressional fundraising are very different than those of presidential races. An alternative model for activist-driven small-dollar congressional campaigns is yet to be perfected, but it can be done, and groups like Our Revolution are working on it. Moreover, Democrats have no choice. They can't win and hold power with the policies and political practices of the past. Laura Moser got a boost when the DCCC attacked her. The party establishment's reputation is so poor these days that one candidate was delighted when the DCCC endorsed his opponent. When the party machinery becomes a liability among its own voters, it is time for the party to change. Richard Esco is Senior Advisor for Health and Economic Justice at Social Security Works and the host of the Zero Hour with RJ Esco on Free Speech TV. Follow him on Twitter at RJ Esco. The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.